Aloha, and we are live now from the Big Island of Hawaii for another episode of A Dose of Positivity. And my special guest today is Kenny Down, and we are going to be talking about Awakening the Spirit Within. And Kenny is an incredible author, and I'm going to be introducing you to him in just a moment. But first, I'm going to take a minute and just to set the tone of our conversation and read from a little passage from my book, Conscious Cures: Solutions to 21st Century Pandemics. And knowing Kenny, he's read the book, he'll appreciate this little warm up for his presentation. This is a section in my book called Beliefs, and I'm just going to read a few passages from it. So I encourage you all just to sit back and relax and take some nice shallow breaths out your nose, and even though I get a little hyped up, this is the time for me also to come into my body and to awaken the spirit within me. So I encourage you all to just relax and take this in. What we believe matters. When our beliefs come from a foundation of love and compassion, a just society will rise. Life is not all sunshine and rainbows. We face our inner darkness and find our light when we understand the value of being true to the many colors of ourselves. Believing we can shine brightly rather than running from the darkness, we discover how enriching life can be. Life's seasons and cycles continually change, as do our beliefs. In the following section, I share some thoughts that have served me well for most of my life and helped me enormously get through those rapidly changing and challenging times. I hope what I have to say brings you comfort and aids peace for you to pour into others. Clear communication can bridge the gaps that so desperately yearned to be filled with kindness. Everything is always in a state of flux. There will be good times and hard times, and how we choose to handle them determine the outcome. Evolution is part of life, and the most flexible organisms find the highest level of success. I choose to be flexible and to adapt. I accept there will be hard times. I understand that all sentient beings and all that is play a significant role in the expression of life. Redefining what success means has helped shape my life. Love fills my internal bank more than the external world that attempts to fill me with fear. I better understand the chaos when I pay attention to being proactive and positive. This fills my internal bank with love, and it helps me stand strong against the chaos, and it fills me with the strength and the compassion to flow and move forward. A natural order contains chaos, which is part of the balance to maintaining and expressing our growth. Coming through the birth canal, after all, was traumatic on many levels. Connecting with our roots and acknowledging the trauma and that it is real and moving beyond it is part of the divine order. The balance is delicate, yet it keeps us stable. It is yin, it is yang. By appreciating chaos as part of life, we become more resilient. Disorder eases and helps us make peace with our mothers, Mother Earth, others, and ourselves. Our actions reflect how we treat ourselves and others. By expressing love, we attract harmonious relationships. And with that, I want to say I love you all, and I welcome you, and I feel the attraction and the magnetic love. And choose to be flexible. Yes, I love that. Comments are so appreciated in this live call that we're having, and any questions you have are so greatly appreciated. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to my special guest who's going to be speaking with us about awakening the spirit within. And Kenny, wave to everybody who can see this. If you're listening to the podcast, you're missing this handsome man. So Kenny, just do me the honor of introducing you, okay? This will just be an introduction, and then we're going to get right into some questions. And I want to thank you all for absorbing some conscious cures and a dose of positivity from me, also known as Mama Donna. So Kenny Down is a best-selling and award-winning author of this incredible book, Darko, which he'll talk a little bit about, and The Sacred Heart of Jonah, The Sacred Heart of Jonah, I'm sorry, it's one book, and A Guided Sleeping Spirit, which I don't have here, The Care and the Keeping of Shan, and the newly released Mirror, the Window, and the Wall. This is the best bathroom read you will ever have, ever, and you can stick it under your pillow too. One of his many profound quotes that I love to repeat is if there ever was a time when our world needs healing, that time would be now. Kenny is grateful, humble, and he is an awakened spiritual seeker. His past difficulties and his current situations are reflected in the body of his literary work. He is an awakened spirit with a happy, whole, and useful life. But it has not always been that way for him. It is a state of being that he's worked hard to have. He spent many years struggling with addiction, as did I, both with the tragedies that tend to lead to relying on drugs and alcohol, food and work for me, and the fallout of reaching for such empty relief. But all those trials have turned out to be a blessing. Now, many years sober, he continues to enlarge his spiritual life. After a successful business career, including being the president and CEO of one of the largest fishing and seafood companies in Washington and Alaska, yes, Kenny Down now devotes his time as an author, presenter, and a teacher. He lives in Seattle with his beautiful wife. And we are so honored to have you here and share with us how your career and how your immune system is doing now and your health is doing now with this new, beautiful spiritual awakening you've had within. Kenny, welcome to A Dose of Positivity.
Well, thank you so much, Donna. I should just bring Donna with me everywhere to make the introductions. That was really great. So I think, there's several things I want to talk about today, but mostly I really want to talk about, my writing and how that has healed me and how that has brought about, deepened my spiritual life and deepened the awareness that I have of the spiritual awakening that I've had in this process, when I wrote the book, Darko, the Sacred Heart of one Johanee Darko. This was a book about modern day Joan of Arc, and it really was a reflection of what Donna had to say in her reading. That this piece that she said, I was just looking because I wrote it down. It says, "A just society will rise," and that was really the core idea behind this book. Was I have always been a fan of Joan of Arc and the history that was there, and how such a young person can bring about such a profound change through a spiritual awakening. And Joan of Arc, the original Joan of Arc, was somebody that had a spiritual awakening. She visited with Saint Margaret and Saint Catherine and the Archangel Michael, who's still revered by the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims. All are people that still all worship in one way or another the Archangel Michael. And so, looking at her story, I thought, well, we are so far off track today as a society. We're just so we've got this polarization in our politics. We've got the corporate wealth, and the people that we really look up to in this world are the billionaires and the heads of these giant corporations, and there's so little reverence today of somebody that just wants to live a spiritual way of life. That reverence has just gotten to be less and less and less, I think. So when I wrote that book, in many ways, I was writing the things that I wanted to tell myself. And that's that healing process of writing. And it's one of the things I wanted to talk about today, because I think Donna and I really have kind of struck a chord on that when I write these things, and these are deep books. These books are, they'll take your breath away a little bit. They pack us a big spiritual punch, the writings that I do. And in many ways, it's been such a cathartic thing for me to sit down. And what I do some reading every day. I'll do some reading, not my own writing, but somebody else's. And then when I read, I'll do some reading out loud. And I'm here in my studio today, but I have a spiritual room that I go to and I do my meditation in. And I'd be happy to show you that room someday. But I'll go in there, I'll do a little bit of reading, I'll read it out loud, and then I do some meditation on what it is that I just read. And then I do some writing on what it is that came to me in meditation. And this is how a lot of my writing comes out. So that was the idea of that book. I've been sober 32 years. That's such a huge part of my life. And I appreciate that Donna mentioned that I'd been in recovery for many years. And so much of the things that I've learned through this process of recovery, there's a story about Michelangelo, the artist, when he created the statue of David, which many people feel in the art community would agree, I should say, that is one of the most premier pieces of artwork ever created anywhere in the world, because it was carved out of a single stone, a single piece of marble, and the detail with every hair on his hands and on his knuckles, and the veins in his arms, and the muscular structure, and everything being proportioned exactly perfect. They asked Michelangelo, how did you create the statue of David? And his answer was, I just took away everything that wasn't David. And that's what's happened for me, is that through the years and through the spiritual work that I've done, all of those things that weren't Kenny dropped away. And what I was left with was a person that could truly pursue their spiritual path, that I could pursue my heart's desire. And when I say my heart's desire is to write, to continue to write. I'm writing another novel right now. This is what I really love to do. And so when I think about the heart's desire, and when I talk about God, I want understood that this is the God of your own understanding. Even though the word comes out of my mouth, the only reason I even use that word is because we suffer this poverty of language and poverty of words in the English language. And so I use that word only to describe the spirit that I connect with, but it's different for everybody else. And it's one of the things that's throughout all of my literatures. I never try to define that term for anyone else. So even though the word comes out of my mouth, it's always what it means to you, never what it means to me, because what it means to me is unimportant. People can't have a spiritual awakening based on my experience or my belief in God. You know, it's the I am, and I get a lot of that in my writing. That the I am is that nobody can say the I am for you. I can say that you know, my name is Kenny and I am a loving child of God, but Donna has to say those words for herself, or Kenneth, or Michaela have to say those words for themselves. Nobody else can say these things for you. And then I know Donna's got some questions, so I'll pause there, but that's just a little introduction into the fact that through a spiritual way of life, I've been able to find my heart's desire and to practice in that direction. And the heart's desire is not there by mistake. You know, it's not a mistake. God is not a trickster. God does not put something inside of us and then not give us the tools to carry that out. And I've been somebody I've had the chance to actually find that out for myself. So Donna, I know you've got some questions and things you want to get to. I could fill the time just talking about different things, but I know you've got some things you want to get to too. So I'll stop there.
No. You know what? Actually, I'm going to love you to do that. I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of things that you said, and as far as the question goes, you have the questions, so you can just go off those questions and keep going. But before we do that, what I wanted to just recognize was that I think that the way, the direction of this conversation, and if everybody can really appreciate what Kenny just said, that whole Michelangelo story, I mean, I got goosebumps right here just thinking about it. I mean, just letting all that exterior go and just how do we find that? And you know, I actually, you were just triggering, and I just happened to have this here, and I'm not trying to sell my books, but just to show you, Kenny and I, like, it's a magnetic attraction when you meet somebody that you never knew you were ever going to meet. And I wrote, this is actually a journal, because I was exactly what Kenny was saying and sharing, I feel is so true. And this journal is about, I am living like the future matters, is a guided journal. Like, how did Michelangelo get to that place? Like, where was those things coming from? And sometimes, like in this modern contemporary world, what we do, we don't have the same images and visuals and stimuluses that Michelangelo did, maybe connecting with nature or starvation or some rampant fever that he got and had this vision. What we get that today too, but we have these kinds of connections. And I want to make everybody aware right on the call today, having someone like Kenny down here to share this awakening thing. I mean, this can be a defining moment for everybody right now, because, you know, I am continues to happen every day. We can change our mind. We can change our brains. We can change everything. We can even come together and co-create a better world together. And I know some of the people who are on the call right now are writers. Roselle, I know you're on here, who's writing, who just wrote a fabulous children's book. There's never too late. It's now. Now is the time. Right now, like right now.
Yeah, so, I agree. The time is now. We're at a place, I think. And in some respects, maybe this pandemic that we're coming out of, or hopefully coming out of, has helped with that. People have realized that there's more to life than just working all of the time, that there's things that they're interested in and that they'd like to pursue outside of that. And so in some respects, I think it's a good thing. You know, one of the things you asked me in our communications, Donna, to talk about a little bit was just to share a little bit of my personal story. And I'm going to do that just really quick, just so people can understand why it is I'm so passionate about this and some of the things that have happened in my life. But I grew up in an alcoholic home with an alcoholic father and an alcoholic and drug addicted mother. And so I spent most of my childhood in institutions, in foster homes, in group homes, and institutions and lockup institutions. And I was incarcerated for most of my high school years, because from a very early age, I was using drugs, and eventually I needed to start committing crimes to support that drug habit. So I grew up here in Seattle. And at 28 years old was when things really came crashing down for me. And I was homeless, and I was a heroin addict. And, you know, it's hard to imagine now looking at the things that my life is. It sounds like I'm talking about a different person, but that was the fact for me when I got sober. And that was what it took to introduce me to the spiritual life, for me to become reasonable about the spiritual life. And there was a doctor back in the 20s and 30s, and I think he probably lived up until around 1960, by the name of Dr. Carl Jung. And he is a fascinating fellow that was very fascinated with archetypes, that people fit into one of these categories somehow. There was this archetypical personality for certain people, whether it was the egotist or whether it was the pessimist. But one of the things that he looked at was addiction and the drug addict. And his conclusion was that at the core of every case of addiction is a yearning for the divine. That somehow people are born with this yearning for the divine, that somehow that there is that there is something more to life, something in the spiritual life that attracts them. But we don't find that when you grow up in homes and areas and cities like I did. In these places I went, there weren't all good places, and bad things happened, and it's difficult to find those things. And so I turned to the proxy for those things, which is drugs and alcohol. There's a reason people call the alcohol the spirits. You know, right. The people would say, oh yeah, grandma's got into the spirits, you know, and there was the spirit of this and the spirit of that. That was the old-fashioned name for alcohol for a reason, because people had these altered experiences, and many people have those kind of experiences. I don't make any judgment about that, using hallucinogenics and those kind of things. Even today, they're finding great therapies and stuff for these type of things, which I don't condone for people like me who are so clean and sober, because we've been down that road and I've tried that and it didn't work. And I just feel like we're born, and Carl Jung's description of this was spiritus contra spiritum. That was his description. And what those words mean is that we need to find the spiritual way of life, but instead we find the spirits, the booze and the drugs and the addiction to other things like work and sex and money and gambling and all of the rest of it, and all of these are in one category. Really, I think that it's this self-harming behavior. That's what it is, you know, that somehow we become obsessed with this desire to destroy ourselves with whatever the substance might be, whether it's gambling or whether it's cocaine and heroin. I just wanted to just jump in there,
please, because what you're saying hit a core from why I wrote my first book, Living Like the Future Matters. And I think that, you know, it's almost like getting back to also writing too, how cathartic is part of the healing process and the healing journey. And what I want to share with everybody who's listening to this is when I did probably 5-6 years of research before I even, you know, it took me 10 years to get my book, the first book out. But I was trying to get to the root cause of these addictions. And what I realized is that it was way bigger than I was a sugar foodaholic. I got up 205 pounds fat, sick, and barely alive. And I was working all the time through the pain and through, but when really, and I'd like you all, everybody who's listening to think about it, is like, really, what is the root cause? I mean, Kenny, you really pointed down to what you grew up in the behaviors of your parents, so it was learned behavior. But then we have, if we really take it and we look at, well, it's not your parents weren't the problem. And then we can find forgiveness there, but then where is the problem? And so where I'm going with all this, and what I have found is that the root cause is this addiction to this unsustainable, unattainable, I call it maybe the American dream, or this looking at, what everybody else thinks the world or your life should be like. And we're working 2 jobs to get this toy or that toy. And we get addicted to this cycle of craziness that if we don't have these things, we're not worthy. And like Kenny, you were saying, so what do? We hit the spirit instead of the spirits. And we drown ourselves because we're not worthy, we're not good enough, we're not achieving. And then, I had to find forgiveness in my alcoholic father and abusive relationships, and realizing that, I forget the movie, I love it, with Robin Williams, but Kevin, remind me, but he says, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. That Kevin, my husband's on there. You know what I'm talking about.
Goodwill Hunting.
Yes, there you go. That's a
right.
great.
There you go. Thank you. Goodwill Hunting. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. So who's going to take responsibility, right, for our behavior or your behavior or whatever? But to me, it was comforting to know, just like we know that there is a God, and we also can appreciate that there is a devil. And who do we choose to worship? And that devil is like, which door do we walk through? Negativity or positivity? We're always drawn to the negativity because psychologically they have proven that the brain, that flight or fear thing, goes to that negative place. And so it's that constant state of grace of finding our center, finding our balance, our meditation, our prayer, or whatever that is.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Donna, that the one of the greatest discoveries that we make is that our problems are of our own making. As adults, that any problem I have is within me, always. It's never the other person. Now, we can watch Fox News and CNN go at it and point the finger at each other and who's the problem, but really, the problem that we have is always within ourselves. And what that means is that it's good news, because if the problem is within me, then the rest of the world doesn't need to change for me to be okay. I don't need to have different parents or a different experience or anything. And I'll point out too, it's not just these abusive and childhoods or the trauma that we experience, because sometimes I think it's more difficult for people that have the same experience that I did, where they end up on drugs and drinking and losing everything. It's harder on them when they come from a good family, because for me, I could say, at least I had the ability and the illusion that it's somebody else's fault. It's because of my mom, it's because of my dad, it's because of this in the family, instead of dealing with that somebody who came from a good family. And people on this call, I think there's ones that will relate to this. It's harder for them because they say, I came from a good family. I came in, and why am I like this? I had everything. Why am I like this? And to have that realization that the problem lies within, and it's us that needs to change. And when we change, the people around us change and the world changes. That on kind of one of the things that's helped, that I wrote this my last book is this Mirror, the Window in the Wall, and it's a really quick little 25-minute read, and I recommend in there the first thing that you read it several times through. But Donna called it her favorite bathroom book, which I haven't ever had that particular one. But it's good. It's just good because you can sit down. But really what that book says in just a quick minute is, it says that when we look in the mirror, we don't see what's actually there. What we see are all of these things that have been placed upon us, which Donna was talking about. Society says you got to look a certain way. You got to have a certain viewpoint. You got to have a certain amount of money. You got to have a certain amount of success. You've got to have all of these things in our lives. And if we don't, we view ourselves as failures, or we have some childhood trauma or some trauma along the way that causes us to think that I look in the mirror and I say, gosh, I'm a failure. I'm not good. If anything good does happen to me, I think, well, this isn't going to last. That's what I see. And so we have this distorted mirror that doesn't work. And when we view ourselves in that way, we don't want to let anybody see that. So then we begin to put up this window. I call it the mirror. The window comes next. And the window is, this is what I'm going to let you see. I'm going to control this window, and I'm going to let you see this part of my life only. And I'm going to only crack the window enough so you can hear what I want you to hear, and I'm going to shut it when I don't want you. And we begin to play a stage character, this persona, which is the persona is what the ancient Romans used to call the mask. You know, that was their word, the persona. That this persona is this character that we play, and we play a character so that nobody can find out what we think is the truth, which is this distorted vision we have in the mirror. And so then the last piece is the wall, that when all that stops working, which it will, if you're playing a character and you're doing this, people will start abandoning ship. Hey, I don't think the Kenny show is going to come off very well. So I'm gonna, and we end up alone, and then we start building walls that we don't want anybody to see anything. We're going to have a separation. I'm a different person at work that I am when I'm with my friends, and that I am when I'm in a 12-step fellowship group or some other group. I'm totally a different person when I'm at church than I am when I'm on the job, for instance, you know, that those kinds of things. And when we have that, the mirror, the window, and the wall, the only way out is through spiritual awakening that brings us about to start getting this realization of our true selves, that really I am a loving child of God, that I am whole, I am complete, that I don't need anything from anybody, that I will be provided for whenever I need something. And the greatest thing is when I can look in the mirror and say, you know, that I'm a loving child of God, and I am surrounded by beauty in all directions. No matter what direction I look at today, I am going to be surrounded by beauty. And I start seeing beauty in areas of places where I may have saw negativity in the past. So, and get to a place where I really can love everybody, not just people that agree with me.
Thank you so much for giving us a window into a mirror, window, and a wall. That's really, and you know, one of the things I think all of us would like to hear, I know I would anyway, is, and I can share my spiritual awakening, or, you know, you have many of them, but share with us, what was that defining moment when you had your first crack of that mirror, and when you first felt that window opening and that wall? When was your first memory of that?
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I look at that, and I've thought about this a lot, you know, where does the spiritual awakening start? And I can tell you this, that the spiritual awakening, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, so this is just my experience with talking to a lot of people, hundreds and maybe thousands of people about this subject, is that the spiritual awakening rarely happens when we're doing just fine. And that my spiritual awakening really began at the worst time in my life, when I would have said that this is the worst I've ever felt. This is the loneliest I've ever been. This is the time when I wished that I wouldn't wake up in the morning, that time in my life. I think it began there. That was the moment that, you know, one of those defining moments in my life where it tenderized me. And I continued to use drugs and drink for a while after that, but it was gone. And then after that, like you've said, I've had several spiritual awakenings. You know, when
how old were you? How old were you when that? Give us a little bigger.
I was 28 years old.
And where were you? Where were you? What were you doing?
I was locked up in a hotel room. I was shooting heroin around the clock, and I was out of money, and I couldn't pay the hotel bill, and so I decided to try to commit suicide. And when I tried to commit suicide, and I woke up the next day and it hadn't worked, I'd injected more drugs than enough drugs that would kill everybody on this call, plus probably 20 more, and somehow lived through that. And when I woke up the next day, I really look at that, and I think that's when my spiritual awakening began. When I knew that I was not in charge of when I could live or die, that I couldn't make myself happy, that there was no way out, and I began to think about getting some help at that time. I didn't immediately, and I don't know if it was 2 weeks or 2 months that I endured that, but until I sought out some help. And then I've had spiritual awakenings. I think probably the biggest one for me in the 12-step process, there's a process of making amends, where we go to the people that we've caused harm to. And when I went back and started paying money back for places that I'd shoplifted from, and when I went to my mother and realized, how much I judged her, and I had these awakenings. Like, my mother was 19 years old when I was born, and I have a brother that's 18 months older than I am, and this was the person that I wanted to blame for all my problems. So I was able just to go to her and say, I remember we had we had Christmases, there was presents under the tree. I knew that beside with all of her problems, she did that. She was a folk singer, my mom, and so she would come in and play songs on the guitar and sing songs until we fell asleep. And I remember just loving when my mom would do that. So the truth was, I really, there was a lot of things about my home that were very loving. I grew up in a very loving home in a lot of ways. There were problems, but I was just able to tell her that I remember that it wasn't all bad, that I remember that we had good times, and that we were fed, and that we loved each other, and there was a healing process that happened in that. And every time I did one of these kind of amends, I would have that spiritual awakening just a little bit more. Just one of these pieces that wasn't Kenny was chipped away by the one artist, and I, helping other people and witnessing their return to health, watching other people make their beds and walk again has been a big part of it. And I still get depression. I still have times when I really get way off track in my thinking, and I'll have trouble sleeping, and I'll be depressed. And it's always in those times when somebody will hand me a book and say, "Hey, have you seen this book?" And it'll be a book that'll bring me out of it, or it'll bring another person. But I'm convinced that these spiritual awakenings continue to happen, and they have to continue to happen. It's, I can't live on yesterday's bread alone. And I'm talking about the spiritual bread. The fact that I've had all these experiences and the spiritual awakenings and all the amazing stuff that came to me when I just went into meditation and said, okay, like I'm writing a new novel and I have a new character, and I've been in meditation, just, God, please show me who this person is. Please show me, what is this? What's driving this person? What made this person the way they are? And these amazing things. But the fact that I have all that, it doesn't spiritually feed me today. I've got to go out and eat some spiritual food and have a new spiritual experience today.
Well, I just have to say, and I think everybody who's listening to this now will feel the same, how sharing your vulnerability and your story, it humanizes it for all of us who are witnessing your bravery to talk about it. And I know that's something that people do in 12-step, but I've not been in 12-step. And it kind of comes back to writing or song making, or Michelangelo doing his art, finding a way to express that grief, that sadness, so that we don't have to go in a hotel room and have that kind of far awakening experience And unfortunately, tragically today, with what we see what's going on with COVID, and I direct that not so much to the virus, but to the media and to the fear and conspiracy and all of this coming down on us. It's not the virus that's, I mean, yes, the virus is real, but this is a virus of the mind. This is a virus of society. This is a virus of taking down the human spirit. And if people aren't willing to acknowledge that, and they're going to go to the spirit instead, then it's up to those of us who have had these awakening experiences, such as Kenny, myself, and probably each and every one of us on the call, to rise up and to help our fellow brother and sisters and our children to stop it.
Yeah, that's right. You know, one of the big points I
stop
make.
The craziness. That's what I wanted to say. Stop
the craziness.
Right, Ken?
Yeah, and so one of the realizations I came to when I was writing Darko, which is really this character, modern day character, Joan of Arc type, that comes to lead a movement that's really going to change environmental and what today we call environmental and social justice issues. You know, these issues that are so prominent in our world today that need to be solved. And one of the realizations that she came to in the book, I came to, and then I wrote it into her character, is the help's not coming from the top. And I'm such a big believer in that you know, the governments, the help, and the example that I use and she uses it in the book. And I know I talk about her as a real person because that's how close I am to the characters. But, you know, the realization that she had was that you can change the king, but if the kingdom doesn't change, you still have the same kingdom, you just have a new king. And that's really what we've done here in the United States. We've elected a new king, and for lack of a better term, you know, it just works with, I'm only using that because it works with the king and the kingdom. But so you've got a new, and from my perspective, maybe I think that that's much better, but than the old king. But it doesn't matter because it's us that has to change. Right. It's not them. And the more that we think that they have to change or that they have to be convinced of anything, the more lost we become in our way. So if we have to change, and it's this bottom-up movement, it's not from the top down, that the top is not, you know, the help is not coming from the top, not coming even a little bit is going to come, then who is going to change the world? Well, it's people that have had these spiritual awakenings. That's the deal, that we've got to talk to people who are living a spiritual way of life, who have the ability to think about things that aren't trying to change the image in the mirror by having a bunch of stuff and doing things. This is the movement, and I personally think it's happening.
Yeah.
You know, for several reasons. One, that is that today we have, you know, at least here in the United States, we have our kids, our children, and I think, you know, my children are grown now, so even younger children, but my kids are still fairly young. They're just out on their own now, but they're, and their generation and younger have grown up in the most diverse culture ever in the world. There's never been a culture like this where people are growing up in these diverse cultures where you've got so many diverse viewpoints and ages of people and mindsets and colors and races and creeds of people, and sexes and sexual orientations. It's just a very diverse culture. And these are the people, I think that's why I made Johanee Darko of such a young character in the book, is because that's who is going to have these big spiritual awakenings in the millions, that these people are going to look for a different way of life in the millions, and we're going to be there to support them.
Absolutely. And you know, here's the thing that I think that shies maybe some people, oh, I've never had a spiritual awakening. You know, a spiritual awakening is what we make of it. It happens a miracle every day, every time we take a breath. It's the simplest thing as seeing a butterfly taking pollen from a daisy or a sunflower. If we take the time to be present and share those moments. And one of the people on the call, Jojo, it's simply bonding with people you love, preferably in nature, and it's perfect if you're in the present. Every day, every moment, every breath that we take is a gift. It is an awakening. It is an opportunity for us to choose to go through the negativity door or the positivity door. It's a choice to go to the heavens or the hells or however you want to look at it. And personally, that's not how I look at it. But whatever spiritual or whatever thing that you look at it, to realizing when you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, you know, I am a grace of God. I am here for a purpose. And now is like we said earlier, now is the time. Now is the time to look at, for me, I look at it every day, every moment. I am having spiritual awakenings all day. And I'm almost 65, almost on Medicare. It's a crazy world. I posted this on my Facebook group today. I was just like looking back and seeing, I look exactly the same, except I have wrinkles and some gray hair, and I'm getting a Medicare card. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, this is a spiritual awakening. I'm here. I'm writing this. I'm alive. I have these memories. I have the opportunity to ignite someone else to feel empowered by getting a Medicare card. And I could look at it like, oh shit, man. But no, it's how we choose to look at each and every situation. It's how Kenny got out of that room, because God obviously had, or whoever universe had, a bigger purpose for you. Obviously, these books were written through you from those purposes. And we all have those purposes. Notice I didn't say purpose. Yeah. We all have purposes. We all have the ability right now to get off of this call and go out and make amends with our mother. That's a spiritual freaking awakening. We all have the power to go outside and smell the snow, because where you are, it's cold. Or for me, you know, feel the snow on your tongue, right? Do you remember that when you were a kid, catching snowflakes? Oh my God. I think that was my first spiritual awakening. I can remember being out, and it was freezing cold. My mother's telling me to come in. I'm all bundled up, but not really. And I'm out there catching snowflakes on my tongue. Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're exactly right. You know, the spiritual awakening, there's as many different descriptions of spiritual awakening as there are people that have had them. And so your description of just seeing a bird take some nectar out of a flower is just amazing. And people have that. And one of my great spiritual mentors, he passed away this last year during the COVID time. So but I still got a chance to get up and see him, and I sure miss him. But he used to say that we have to have a spiritual awakening every day, on this idea that we can't live on yesterday's bread. And so sometimes the spiritual awakening is just as simple as that. It's just as simple as noticing something in nature as beautiful as the little hummingbirds that we have that come out here to our yard and take from the feeder or take from the flowers. It's just beautiful. And other days it's maybe something much, much bigger than that, where I'll have one of these aha moments and I'll just I got to get downstairs here and do some writing. But every day it's a good thing to think about when you go to sleep tonight. Think about what kind of a spiritual awakening did I have today?
That's so beautiful. You know, I encourage you, maybe you guys have all seen this, but I just have to bring this up now because there's you all know Bob Newhart. And if you Google Bob Newhart, and he has this little 5-minute video, and I think it's called Stop It, right, Kevin? It's Bob Newhart, Stop It. And, you know, it just makes you really realize, like, when we look at all these neuroses or all these things we think that we have about ourselves, and we're spending all this time thinking about those things, when we can go out and we can reconcile with people, with the things, those demons, all right? Or we can be instead of festering on those things like, I'm afraid of this, afraid of that, it's just like change the language. And, but yeah, I encourage you to Google Bob Newhart. If I can find it, I'll put it in the chat after this call on when we go on mute. No, I'm going to be putting a lot of links in here too. But I just absolutely have adored this conversation, Kenny. We have so much more to talk about, but our time is running really low. And I would like so much, I like to keep on time, with this, but what I would really love for you to do is just take us home right now. Give us some of your juiciest golden nuggets. We have about 5 minutes. And then afterwards, if anybody wants to stay on the call, what we do is I take you around my gardens. I show you butterflies hanging on flowers and bananas growing off the trees and all that in my yard for an extra potent dose of positivity. But I just am so excited about getting to know you better. And I feel like everybody on the call, I can see smiles, like people who are on here right now. This has really hit a core with me, you, all of us, to knock down those walls, go out and reconcile, feel those spiritual moments. And so all the time we're breathing. And so with that said, Kenny, you have just given us so much stuff to think about and I don't know, you've given us permission, really, in a way, and through your books and through your writing, giving us all permission to get on that horse and ride with our purpose. So please give us some closing words, and I am so grateful to you.
Well, thank you. So I suppose in closing, one of the things I'll give you an analogy that's been really helpful to me. And so this is an analogy about a garage. And so when I was a kid, and there were times when I was a young kid that it was just better to kind of wander the streets all night than it was to go home to the place where I had a bed, because there was stuff going on that was not good. So a friend of mine had a garage. His parents were in the house, and he was allowed to live in the garage, and he'd fix this garage up just killer. He had big speakers in this garage, these, and in my day, back when I was a kid, the bigger the speaker, the cooler it was. And so these speakers were like as big as human beings, these gigantic speakers he had in his stereo system, and we would listen to music and we would get high and drink, and he had blacklight posters. It was just the most cool place in the world, and girls would come over, and it was just great, just a wonderful place. And he had this really, really mean dog, and somehow I thought that was really cool, but I just loved that, and so when I was homeless as a kid, I spent a lot more time homeless as a young kid than I did when I was an adult. Up until the very end, I was pretty good at being able to take care of myself and find a hotel room for the night, or I had some game, so I was okay most of the time. But when I would wander around, sometimes I would just look at people's garages as I was walking around neighborhoods, and I would see their garages, and I would think, man, that is a cool place. And if somebody would let me live in that garage, I would fix it up just like Steve's place. I would fix it up, and I would have stereo in there, and I'd have a hot plate, and I'd have a microwave, and I'd have a place I'd put curtains up, and I have a bed in there, and maybe I could get some girls to come over. I knew a few girls that would think a garage like that was pretty cool. And so all of these things, and I would think, gosh, and I would just go and I would walk around. I would see these clearly underutilized garages and think to myself, well, my life would be great if I could just have a garage like that. And it wouldn't even be my garage. It would be, my life would be great if somebody else would let me live in their garage. And one of the things that happened to me through following this spiritual path is I was able to realize that I was pretty good at business. And so I've had a good business career, and I admittedly, I think I got off track and worked harder than I should have, but I had some success, and I live today in a beautiful house here in Seattle, and I got a view of I've got a big view of the water, and I mean, it's a really spectacular place. And I was thinking about that story, I was thinking about that time. Somehow I was remembering that a few years back. And what occurred to me was that I never saw the house. I never saw the house, like that God would have me live in a house. It was sitting right there in front of me. Every one of these garages had a house and a family and a yard, and all I could think about was, what is it? If somebody else would let me live in their garage, it would be great. And so that's the thing I would leave everybody with, is to think about, what is the garage in your life? What is that one thing that you're so focused on? If I could just have this, my life would be great, that you're missing the big picture, and you can't even see all of these wonderful things that you can have that are obtainable, your heart's desires, the things that are much more important. So we get so focused on the little thing that, God, if I could just have this, or if I could just get that, or this job, or that person, or this person would be my friend, all of those kind of things, that we miss the big picture. So there you go, Donna. That's a little pearl of wisdom that I'll leave you with.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And I so appreciate that closing story. I'm sitting here in my beautiful home, and just imagining you having had to go through all that you did, and to see, I guess proud is the first thing that comes to my mind, to champion your life the way you have. And you're a role model and an example for all of us. And I'd like to thank you so much, Kenny Down, for coming on, for your writings, for your brilliance and your vulnerability, and sharing your stories with us today. And
well, thank you. Yeah, if people are interested, you can find information. Just, you don't need to search too much. Just do a search for author Kenny Down, and you'll find a lot of stuff, and it'll direct you to my website, which is newthoughtlife.org. newthoughtlife.org, and there you can have it. And I just want to thank everybody too. I see Jackie is here, and we had quite a few people that joined that are friends of mine. I appreciate it, from Bill and Bob and Bill, who's saying that he's my best and favorite spiritual sponsee, which is probably the case. That's true. He's my favorite. So
good.
Jackie, so thank you so much, everybody. Oh, look at who it is. I see who that is now. Good. Yeah, well, love you, everybody.
Yes, and everybody who wants to stay on too, because TJ's going to put some links. She just put in.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, and I'm going to also share that you can listen to the replays and share the replays with your friends and family. We're now on YouTube, and TJ will put the link in there. And we also have a podcast now, so all the replays are on there, so you can listen to Kenny anytime, and myself. And I encourage you to come back to A Dose of Positivity. Next week, we have an incredible guest coming on. Rita Jean Flemming will be on, talking about building our health through regenerative health, regenerative agriculture, and we get into spirituality on every one of these calls, and remind you that everything we're talking about right here on A Dose of Positivity is intended to help you build your immune system and to become the best version of yourself, so you can make the world a better place, just being you with a special gift that only you have, and acknowledging that and going off and doing something about it, because that is our spiritual awakening. And I want to thank you so much, and much love to you all.